Hello, my name's Daniel Lutringer, member 1007. Welcome to the last episode of our New South Wales Referees Life Member Series. Today we've been fortunate enough to be joined by a man who's done almost 150 first grade games as a touch judge, full of a multitude of achievements. He also has a story that well and truly reflects the association's past, present and future. It's Bryan Gilchrist. Welcome, Bryan.
Hi Dan, how are you? Great to be here, finally.
I'm very well, thank you. How have you been? How have you been keeping yourself busy and occupied during this COVID period?
Yeah, mate, all good here. I guess we've been a little luckier than most in our family. I've been working through the pandemic at council. I generally go into the office each day. I have had the option of working at home, but only living 15 minutes from home, I'm happy to go in and try and keep a bit of normality around. In fact, we've been busier than most. I work in the buildings assets section, and all our units like libraries and communities and leisure centres want all their work done. You know, they want maintenance and upgrades and everything undertaken while everything's been shut. So, mate, we've been a bit busier than most, I guess, at the moment. Alison's been working at a medical centre 3 days a week. Lauren, school teacher like yourself, I think last term she was teaching from home a fair bit, but this term has been at work every week. And Andrew's been in and out of Cricket New South Wales offices, working at home and working from the office. So, mate, as I said, we're luckier than most people. Those poor buggers that have been put off and are on Job Seeker or Job Keeper and whatever. Mate, very sad for those guys. I do feel very sorry for them. But like most people on weekends, we've been bunkered down at home, catching up on a few jobs around the house and I guess looking after my mum over at her place. We've had her foot nailed to the floor. She's 83, so mate, we've had her foot nailed to the floor and wouldn't let her go out. So, yeah, been busy there. I think luckily last weekend, Alison and I broke away and went up to Nelson Bay for the weekend, which is probably our first little trip away for some time, which was lovely.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's been pretty much business as usual for the Gilchrists. You mentioned
business as usual, yeah.
You mentioned working at Sutherland Council. What's working life been for you over your career? You've been there for about 10 years, is that right?
Oh, a few more than that, mate. During my school years, I did a number of things. Like everyone else, I guess I did a few paper rounds and worked as a paper boy. I worked at a number of local factories down around Tarrant Point during school holidays, just as a general hand, which I didn't really enjoy, but, mate, we did it during school holidays. I actually obtained my first real job as a trainee structural draftsman with the Electricity Commission of New South Wales, midway through my Year 12 HSC year. Elcom luckily let me finish the year at school, do the HSC exams. I had 2 weeks off and began work on the 1st of December 1980 as a trainee draftsman. I was with Elcom for about 10 years, just shy of 10 years, when I then went and worked with Doug Winton over at TNT Properties for the next 5 years. Unfortunately, TNT changed hands changed to the Dutch Postal Company, and just about every man and his dog got retrenched at that time. I went through a bit of an unsettled period. I worked as a project manager for a furniture company for about 12 months before everyone there got laid off as well. I then worked for a facilities manager, as a facilities manager at Central Sydney Area Health Service, which I didn't really enjoy, before joining Sutherland Council as a project officer for their building services unit. That role's changed a bit over the years into building assets, as it is today, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm coming up to 20 years. It'll be 20 years in October I've been with councils.
Okay. I might have to give my researcher, Andrew Gilchrist, a sack. He gave me that tip about 10 years.
He's got absolutely no idea why you'd approach him.
All right, let's have a look at your refereeing career. So you commenced your refereeing career with Cronulla in 1981 as a senior, but you actually started a few years earlier as a junior. Why did you decide to take it up?
As you said, I started as a junior. I sort of fell into the role. As you know, refereeing was in the family. I was born into it. I really don't know life without football. Dad was a life member of St George, Cronulla, and of course New South Wales Referees Associations. We went to all association functions in those days, picnics, tennis days, any social function that was going, we went to for all three associations. As a kid, I'd follow him around at grade level. I got to watch him at grade level plenty of times, so that was great. And as I said, I sort of actually fell into it. In the Cronulla district in those days, either Dad, Doug Winton, or an ex-grade guy, Ross Hensley, was sort of the three coaches. And you went around to their places one night a week for about 3 weeks to get your ticket. They'd put you through the board. You'd go for about a month. If they thought you were ready to go downtown, they'd send you to one of the other guys and they'd examine you. And if he thought you were ready, then they'd finally send you down to Phillip Street. Dad had about 3 or 4 guys at home one Tuesday night, I think it was, putting them through the board. And I just happened to sit in on one of those occasions. 3 or 4 weeks later, I had a schoolboy's ticket. It was as simple as that. It wasn't planned, and I certainly wasn't pushed into it. It just sort of all happened, and 3 or 4 weeks later, I had a schoolboy's ticket.
You mentioned your father, Carl. How much of an influence was he in those early days, seeing what he achieved in refereeing? Of course, a former first-grade touch judge, 67 games, and as you mentioned, a life member of New South Wales Referees Association in 1983. How big of an influence was he early on?
Well, as I said, I never really set out to be a referee, and I've got to say, he never pushed me into being a referee. Once I had my ticket, I certainly wanted to emulate his achievements and become a graded referee. That was always my goal as a district referee. I guess mixing with so many graded referees around him, I always wanted to be one. Just being a good district referee was never going to cut it. Dad was at every game that I refereed. As I said, he never pushed me, but he was certainly my biggest critic without any doubt, and he let me know it on many occasions. He was always far more critical of me than he was of my fellow junior referees that he used to watch. And I guess that used to frustrate me at times, but probably paid off in the end. As I look back, I'm sure Andrew would say it's a similar story for him. For when he got his ticket and I watched him throughout his career, I always know I was probably a bit tougher on him than I was on anybody else.
Yeah. Now, he has his own award named after him at Cronulla. That must be special for your family.
Yeah, it is. It is special, mate. It's very nice. The Gilchrist Memorial Award, and that's given for the A-grade Grand Final Referee of the Year. The referee referees the A-grade Grand Final or the highest grade if there's no A-grade Grand Final. I'm given that honour by the association. I have been since it was inaugurated to present that award each year, which is lovely. At some point, I dare say I'll hand that honour over to Andrew. I think he should, take over the reins of that down the track. Dad was a foundation member of Cronulla when the association was formed in 1963. Funny enough, that was the year I was born. He was obviously a busy man at that stage of his life. When Mum and Dad got married in 1960, they built a house in Miranda. A lot of people used to say, God, you're going over the Shire. There's nothing in the Shire in the 1960s. What are you living that far away for? But times have changed. Living in the Shire, he was part of a group that formed the Cronulla Association in 63, breaking away from the St George Association. So whilst Cronulla became his primary association, he always maintained great loyalties to St George. We always went to, as I said, functions of both association, and he was a very proud life member of both Cronulla and St George.
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, I can remember seeing an image you attended recently, the St George Centenary dinner. Yes,
we did. Yeah, that was great. And it was something that I always wanted to go to because, as I said, and we took Mum. I made sure Mum came to that because that's where Dad started his refereeing career and was a life member there. So it was a function that I really wanted to attend, given our close ties with the St George Association.
Now, prior to your time in grade, you received probably your first big piece of recognition as a referee when you're awarded the John Burns Memorial Trophy at Cronulla. This would have been a bit of a buzz early in your refereeing career.
Yep, certainly was a buzz. I was only the second person to receive that award after it was inaugurated the previous year. The first recipient was Ross Hensley, who I see you've got pictured there presenting that to me. He's a great bloke, Ross Hensley, a wonderful, wonderful man, mad South supporter, and a great friend of mine. And mate, we had some wonderful days in the Cronulla district in those early days with Roscoe and Winton and that. Just great days. Yeah, so Ross was the first one, and I was the second one to receive that in what was it,
84.
84. Yeah. John Burns, just so you know, John Burns was the foundation president of the association when it was formed in 1963. I knew John well. He was only a little guy, but a great character. And I guess to the Cronulla Association, the John Burns Award is very similar to, I guess, the George and Amy Hanson Award at New South Wales. And it's probably the highest honour we can receive outside of life membership.
Now, you were graded in 1985 as graded member 748. Can you tell us a little bit of your recollections of the time?
Yeah, I do. It was a great time. I was lucky enough to referee the 1984 President's Cup Grand Final between Norths and Illawarra, and that was on the cricket ground. In fact, I was doubly lucky that year, 84. I refereed the semi-final again on the cricket ground on the Saturday before, and it was the game before an Australia versus Great Britain Test match. So that was just an unbelievable thrill. I actually went home and had my 21st birthday that night, would you believe? Went home from the cricket ground and my 21st birthday. As I said, I was then lucky enough to be appointed to the final. And again, that was on the cricket ground the following Tuesday week before a state of origin. Unfortunately, in that night, it rained and rained and rained. It was torrential. I can remember after the game, we all walked back to across the road to the car park, and we were knee deep in water. There was that much rain that night. It was unbelievable. But anyway, running on the cricket ground, I didn't care. At 21, and I'd done 2 games on the cricket ground, it was just beyond my dreams at that stage. My father used to call the cricket ground the Holy of Holies, and he was 100% right. There was nothing like running on the cricket ground, and it's still the best today. I guess I wrote here that, mate, being the #1 junior rep at the end of that season, I was also appointed to the very prestigious, and for those old people had to do it, the grand final of Business Houses competition at Reg Bartley Oval. That was a very different competition, and may bring a few laughs to a few people. An old couple, I can't remember their names, used to run it, but it was just something we had to do in those days, and I refereed the grand final. But 1985 rolled around, and we'd been invited to trial for grade. I do remember we did our usual round of under-23s trials, I think as everyone did in those days. Then in the last weekend of trials, Eric Cox, who was then the director of referees, gave myself and Peter Filmer half a reserve grade trial each at Belmore Sports Ground between Canterbury and St George. I can't remember who did the game or who did what half, whether Pete did the first half or the second half or vice versa. I can't quite remember. But that just blew me away. At that stage in my life, to get half it was a trial, half a reserve grade trial was unbelievable. I still couldn't, and I was just amazed at the pace of the game. I'd never refereed anything like it at that stage in my career. So that was a great thrill. Luckily, Pete's and my names were on the graded list that came out on the Tuesday morning after that. I think I actually got a phone call from Eric on the Monday night telling me that I'd been graded, which was lovely. That group included, as I said, Pete, I know Kevin Russell, Merv Preslins. I think there were a couple of others, but I'm getting old, I can't remember anymore. Merv Preslins was from Parramatta. He was a first grade referee. Kev Russell was one of the great touch judges. He was a fantastic touch judges. Did you have a couple more?
Yeah, I think on the screen there, I think the one with the asterisk, Keith Gegg. And Harrigan?
Kegg, and Lance Harrigan, that's right, it was too. Yeah, Keith Gegg. Keith was from Canberra, or lived at Goulburn, and Lance Harrigan was from South, and they were both first grade touchies as well, very good touchies. So it was a good crew. I couldn't remember the other two. You're 100% right. Yeah, my first grade game, and I do remember, was a 20 and under 23s line at the cricket at the old Sydney Sports Ground. For those that remember the old Sydney Sports Ground, and would you believe Matt Hewitt was my referee on that day, and I ran his line. It was an interesting day. For those that remember the old sports ground, the ambulance room was actually next to the referee's room, and unfortunately someone in the crowd had a heart attack and passed away, and we were locked out of the referee's room for much of the day. So it was quite an experience, my first day of grade football.
Now, at what point during your grade career did touch judging become the path for you?
Oh, that's a real easy question to answer, mate. You know when it's time. You know when it's time to retire, and it's true. It really is true. I knew it was time to become a touchy, and so did the coaches. I'd been refereeing for many years. I'd spent a lot of time in reserve grade, refereed a lot of reserve grade. I did some first grade pre-season games, but I never really took that step to becoming a first grade referee. I couldn't run out of sight in the dark night, and I guess that had a lot to do with it, mate. I was as slow as a wet wheat. I was refereeing Metro Cup at the time. I did a game at Layla Park. I'm sure it was Layla Park, somewhere out west out there, which wasn't the most pleasant place for somebody from the Shire to be heading out to. I can remember going into the change rooms, and there was a sign on the wall of the change rooms out there saying, "Be careful of used syringes in the amenities." I knew at that time there had to be something better than this. Other guys who were graded well after me were running first grade games around the country, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, etc. And I thought to myself, that's got to be better than running second division at Layla Park. The coaches, Mick Stone, Max Thompson, I think Kevin Roberts came over to me at training at really pretty much the same time and put it to me to become a touch judge. And mate, the decision was easy, and the rest, they say, is history.
Yep. Certainly went on from there. Now, your debut as a first grade touch judge comes in round 20 of 1992. It's a match between Illawarra and Penrith at Wynn Stadium. Bill Harrigan was the referee and Bryan Bonney was on the other touchline. Can you tell us a bit about how this came about, and do you remember much of the lead up to the game?
It came about. Mick Howell was actually supposed to do the game. It was late in the year, around 20, I think you said. It was late in the year, and it was Mick Howell was supposed to do it, and he pulled out, and I got the call up at training on the Wednesday night at Lidcombe Oval. They came up to me late in the session and pulled me out and said, "Mick Howell's injured. You're in. Congratulations." Blah blah blah, and that's how it sort of suddenly came about. I couldn't remember it was Bill and Bryan. You couldn't wish to make your debut with two better people. It was a Sunday afternoon Channel 9 game, which in those days was a real big deal. You either had the Friday night Channel 9 game or the Sunday afternoon Channel 9 game, and it was the Sunday afternoon game. So I really did get thrown in the deep end. You normally didn't make your debut on a TV game in those days, that was for sure. But I always remember Martin Weeks said to me that in reserve grade, you can yawn, you can sleep, you can have a doze and still pick up an incident. He said in first grade, you blink and you've missed something. And let me tell you, that's 100% correct. It was that fast, I couldn't get over it. I do remember the first half I was on the near side, and very early in the game, I think the ball went back to a fullback and he put a kick through and there was a scuffle. The kicker got taken late and there was a push and shove and a few punches and whatever. And of course I'm in sort of watching the blue. Needless to say, the ball's gone down my touch line, and whether it went in or out, I think luckily it might have gone out, but which gave me a bit of time. But I can remember sort of sorting out the blue and chasing the ball down the line, and everything just sort of happened at 1,000 miles an hour in that first game. It was a great thrill, and a great thrill to run with Bill and Bryan.
So who were some of those that had a big influence on your career? You mentioned your dad starting out at Cronulla, but who were some of the other ones that had a big influence from Cronulla right through to first grade?
Yeah, well, obviously my dad, as you say, he was a massive influence. Doug Winton was and still is a very, very close family friend and a very, very close mate. He was a massive influence. He was a first grade referee from the Cronulla Association and later a first grade touch judge. Um, what he achieved in this game, both on and off the fields, at the New South Wales level and the Cronulla Association level, just isn't worth talking about. Just unbelievable what that man has done for the game. Mate, John Colenso was another Cronulla referee, a fantastic touch judge, test match touch judge, state of origin touch judge, grand finals. In fact, he did a state of origin in California, the one that went to the USA. He was an unbelievable man and a great person, just a wonderful, wonderful man, and passed away way too young. Some of the other great Cronulla referees, Ross Hensley, as I said, Johnny Bomber Blomfield. We had great times, great laughs. There were some district referees when I was young, Ron Chambers, Jack Ricketts and Barry Stevens. Barry actually ran my President's Cup final line, which was a great thrill to run that game with another Cronulla referee. I was graded at 21, so I really didn't spend a lot of time in the district when I was younger. I was graded reasonably quickly. Some of the Cronulla referees that I was graded with, it was always nice to run around with Cronulla referees, Jeff Weeks, Scotty Portsmouth, Paul McEnanty. But some of the other guys that had influences on my career, as I said, the likes of Eric Cox. Eric was a great supporter of mine. Kevin Jeffs, another close family friend of the Gilchrists. Joey Griffiths. Frank Walsh was good to me in my junior rep days. And then, of course, our grade coaches throughout the many years, Michael Stone, Kevin Roberts, Spags, Dennis Spagarino, and, of course, the two touch judge coaches that had great influence on my career, Max Thompson and Ian McCall. They were all massive influences on my career. I was very fortunate. Dan, I could go on and list 1,000 names of people who've assisted me over the years, and I'd still leave many out. No?
Yeah, I think that's the fantastic thing about the business we're in, the amount of people, the support network that we have as we come through in our refereeing endeavours. Now, who were some of the guys on the field that you most enjoyed keeping company with and running with?
Oh, mate, again, it's like how long's a piece of string. I could list names forever. Mate, the one referee that, and I think most touchies in my era loved working with, was Eddie Ward. I had some great days with Eddie. He was a wonderful referee and a great referee to run with. I've always said the very best thing that ever happened to me when I came into first grade was that they teamed me up for Martin Weeks for around the first 10 weeks of first grade. I learnt so much from Weeksy in those early days. It was unbelievable. I can remember running a game in Brisbane with Weeksy and Greg McCallum, and I was just brand new to first grade, and it was Brisbane and Canberra, and both of those guys were just icons of refereeing at that time, and they come off the game and said that game was the equivalent of any state of origin. You know, it was a star-studded Canberra side and a star-studded Brisbane side, and they said that was equal to any state of origin. So I just thought to myself, bring it on. But Weeksy, in those first 10 weeks, I learnt so much from him. He was fabulous. Some of the great touchies I ran with, Cole Jones was great. Cole White, Steve Betts, Brian Bonney, Bart, and Leon Edney were great touchies. I enjoyed running around with Kelvin Jeffs. And then there's some other guys, you know, the Phil Battens. Phil and I, we had laughs galore along the way. Riley Brown was with. I think I spent the first year as a touchy in reserve grade with Riley. Some great referees, David Manson, Graham West, Greg McCallum and Bill, of course. You know, I could go on forever. Mate, as I said, I got graded with Peter, and my first grade game was with Matt Hewitt. And mate, we're still mates today. That's the great thing about this game. The friendships you create and the fun times we've had, you wouldn't miss that ride for the world. I mean, as I say to the younger ones today, mate, we had fun. And unfortunately, I don't believe that the younger ones have the fun that we had in our day. I suppose I'm a bit luckier than most. I've had the pleasure of mixing with referees from three eras. Mine, of course, as I've just mentioned. But then I mix with referees from Dad's era, the likes of the Cole Pierces, the Laurie Brewers. I loved Laurie. Laurie could tell you a story that, mate, he'd keep you enthralled for days telling stories. Laurie Brewers, the Keith Holmans, Keith Pages, the touch judges like Reg Dick, and the wonderful Bryan Barry, who's our ambassador at the moment. Guys, just unbelievable guys. And of course, then, mate, there's the guys from Andrew's era, all you guys that yourself, Paddy's, the Currys, Lovedays. Oh, not so much Loveday, he was a pest, but no, we love Nathan. But, you guys from the junior rep days, I've been very lucky to be a part of you younger guys. That's just icing on the cake, I guess. I've loved being involved with you.
Now, 1992 was a bit of a kickstart for you. As you mentioned, you got your debut, but you also finished the season touch judging the Metropolitan Cup Grand Final at Parramatta Stadium between Newtown and Wentworthville. I think Steve Clark was the referee. And then you also had some success in the final series of first grade with Ingalls. Can you tell us a little bit about your memories of this time?
Yeah, it was great. I was lucky when they did ask me to become a touch judge. I think it might have been by arrangement. We sort of agreed that I'd start in reserve grade. So they put me in reserve grade, and I think I was teamed up with Riley Brown for much of the year. Riley was a great character, and I loved running with Riley. Mate, we were the opposite ends. He could run and I couldn't. So, mate, he was mad. He used to go out and run around the oval for 4 hours before a game warming up, and I'd sit in the room reading the Big League magazine. So I'd ask him to do a lap for me so I'd feel good before we went out. But, so I spent the year with Riley and in reserve grade. And as you said, I'm not sure Riley didn't or wasn't appointed to the finals. I'm not sure the Metro Cup Grand Finals, but I went on to do the Metro Cup Grand Final with Clarkey that year. And Peter Hewitt, you said. So it was interesting. I do remember because when we were doing the grand final, I remember Clarkey's missus and my wife were pregnant at the time. So that was an interesting night. And then I think it was Tony Danks and I went on to do the first grade in-goal semi-finals after the Metro Cup Grand Final. And we were beaten by Billy Glynn and Tony Butler, Bill and Bub they used to call them, Bill and Tony, who went on to do the first grade in-goal grand final. I think it was only the second year that in-goal judges had been used in the competition. I think I've got a feeling Max Dunn was the first one to do a first grade in-goal grand final the year before. And the next season I basically started as a first grade touch judge.
Now, at the end of 1993, you get your first taste of Grand Final Day with the East versus Cronulla President's Cup Grand Final. This would have been a nice achievement to be there on Grand Final Day.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely. I'd been going to Grand Finals for 1,000 years, and I remember going to Grand Finals at the cricket ground and watching Grand Finals and that sort of thing. And to be actually on Grand Final Day was wonderful. To be one of the top 6 touch judges that made it through to the end of the season was a great thrill. I ran with Graham and Keith Gegg, and we had a fantastic day. A great thrill to be on Grand Final Day. I was lucky enough to do a few lower grade Grand Finals, and each one of them was just spectacular.
Now, you discussed before about Layla Park and the change room. I suppose this next bit is an absolute stark contrast when in 1994 you make your State of Origin debut in Game 2 at the MCG. This was the highest rugby league crowd in Australia at the time, 87,000. This must have been an extremely exciting time in your career. Can you talk us through it?
It was a fantastic night. I still run into so many people come up to me today and tell me that they were there on the night. They were at Melbourne, even today. I ran with Graham Annesley. The wonderful Dave O'Keefe, great character. And the in-goal guys were Dave Turvey and Peter Kelly. I remember we flew down on the morning of the game. They took us for a tour of the ground before lunch, and it was fantastic. I remember running out and we stood for the national anthem facing the Great Southern Stand. And when you looked up and looked around, and the size of that Southern Stand that just virtually went vertical and hit you in the face was just unbelievable. The noise, the amount of people and the noise, you can't, it was nothing like it at that time. The game, the ground is actually, the actual field is so far away from it, and the ground is that big, the field is that far away from the crowd, but the noise they made, you couldn't hear yourself think. It was a great thrill. I remember before the game that there was a female streaker actually on the ground before the game. It was in the far diagonal corner to me, so I really didn't get a good look at her before she got escorted off. They assigned a police officer, a copper, to us down there, and it was his duty to walk her off the field. And I remember him saying in the room at half time that he didn't know whether to put his cap over her boobs or over a downstairs region. So he said, "Bugger it, I just stuck it on my head and let her walk off naked." So that was a funny one. But mate, the crowd, the noise, just the atmosphere to do State of Origin was the greatest thrill ever. And to do it on the MCG, a ground, and as I said, I grew up a cricket tragic, and to run on the MCG was just unbelievable, especially after running on the cricket ground. A great thrill. The crowd, the noise. I remember after the game we went out till early in the morning, and that's the night you might have heard the famous story that Dave O'Keefe famously ended up out on the street in front of the tram stop in his jocks. So it was quite a night. So there's a full story behind that, which a few people know. I won't go into it, but he unluckily ended up out on the street in his jocks and had to walk back in through the front main door and sort of go through the experience of being a little bit humble and a bit of fun. But anyway, yeah, it was great.
Now, in somewhat of an irony, the end of 1994 sees you appointed to the President's Cup Grand Final again, with the same two teams and same referee as the year previous. You must have been feeling pretty comfortable, not that we ever feel comfortable, with where your career was heading at this point.
Yeah, I did. I think that it was about this point that I was starting to feel fairly established, I guess, in first grade, having done in the second grand final and a State of Origin. I was feeling comfortable at that level. I ran that game with Graham Mannersley and great mate Cole White, who was just a great touch judge as well. He was a fabulous touch judge. Again, running on grand final day is a great thrill. And I've got to say, I did feel very, part of a very close knit of first grade touch judges. We were all pretty close at that time. We used to train a lot together and run together and mix together. It was a great group. Mixing with the best referees, best touch judges and best players in the game was great.
In 1995, you're a participant in a rugby league first, when the North Queensland Cowboys make their entry into the first grade competition at Dairy Farmers Stadium against the Bulldogs. What are your memories of this trip to North Queensland and the experience of the night? Yeah,
it was a night I'll never forget. I reckon everyone in Townsville was pissed that night. They were, honest to God. I reckon everyone was pissed. Tim Mander refereed the game, and I was on the game with my running mate Cole White. They played reserve grade up there. They did play reserve grade, and they graded 3 guys from up that way to run the reserve grade lines. I can't remember their names, but they virtually took it in turns to run the lines. And I can remember we had to take a whole heap of gear up for them. And I remember one of them saying, those tracksuits, training shirts, all that sort of jazz. And one of them said to me, "Oh, I don't own a tracksuit. I don't own a jumper. We never have to wear them up here." So I thought that was funny. But the other thing I thought was funny that Cole and Max Thompson asked us at training before we went up to go up and guide them through the night. They'd never refereed at reserve grade level or anything like that. Tell them what to do, guide them through the pre-game and all that sort of jazz. And I remember Cole and I saying to him, well, come on, you guys have got to go and check the gear before the game. And they looked at us ash and white saying, what in the hell are you talking about? They'd never done anything like that before. So we had to sort of talk them through that and get them through what they had to do to get out there and run a reserve grade line. But mate, I do remember the night. It was a stinking hot night. It was very, very hot. We stayed at the casino actually that night, and it was quite wild up there. Mate, I remember North Queensland actually almost got up. Canterbury won the game, but only just. And mate, if Townsville, if North Queensland had a won, I reckon Townsville would have been an absolute mess that night. Tim had one off early in the game, which set the scene up for a very interesting game. And I also remember that there was 4 new teams into the NRL or the ARL competition. Yeah, I think it was ARL competition at that stage. Auckland, there was 4 new teams in, and the league had chartered a plane to take league officials and dignitaries to all 4 venues. They flew to Auckland for the Friday night game. Auckland started, and then they flew from Auckland to Brisbane for the Saturday afternoon where the Queensland Crushers played. And then from Brisbane, they flew up to Townsville for the Saturday night game, and then on to Perth on Sunday for when the Western Reds made their debut. And I can tell you, by the time they got to Townsville, mate, there was quite a few dignitaries and quite a few league officials that weren't in a real good state. And I don't know how the hell they got to Perth on the Sunday, but yeah, unbelievable. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, what a rugby league road trip that would have been. And now,
yeah, absolutely.
Rep honours come your way again in 1995 when you achieved your first international. The test between Australia and New Zealand was played at Suncorp Stadium. The referee was the New Zealander Dennis Hale, and the other touch judge was again Cole Jones. What are your memories of this experience?
Yeah, it was a Friday night game at Lang Park. It was in the middle of the Super League war, I think, from memory. I didn't care. I was doing a test match, and that was the pinnacle, or I guess in those days it was the pinnacle of anyone's career. Some would say as touch judge state of origin is. I'm still old school. Doing a test match was the pinnacle of anyone's career. It was something my dad didn't do. He refereed New South Wales, or did New South Wales, Queensland, but he never did a test match. So that was very nice to achieve that goal. I was appointed with my great mate Cole Jones, who was an unbelievably great touch judge, and Dennis Hale, as you said, from New Zealand. It was the first time that I'd ever run with an international referee. It had always been New South Wales or Queensland referee. So that was interesting. He was a lovely guy. He was a really lovely guy. And I remember he presented us, Cole and I, with a book on New Zealand. He was a really lovely guy, and he made us feel very welcome and very part of the team. Mate, it was a great experience. And mate, I was a test match touch judge, and I've got to say, very proud of it. And in those days, the Cronulla Association used to present you with a green Australian blazer if you ran a test match line. So that was a great honour.
Now, you mentioned Super League. At this time in your career, Super League was fast approaching. We know now some of the impacts it had on all facets of the game, officiating, players and the like, with different impacts on different groups and individuals. What impact did it have specifically on your career?
Yeah, Super League was a very, very difficult time for all of us. I know our chairman in recent correspondence has made reference to that fact, and he's 100% correct. It was a horrible time. Mate, it was reported and it was known that a number of leading referees had signed up with Super League. Super League split the game and divided referees as well. The leading referees, and as we know, Bill, Graham, Steve Clark had all signed up with Super League, and it was reported they were on very healthy contracts, and good luck to them if they got that. Mate, the ARL were then scrambling to sign up the rest of us so that no further officials would leave the establishment. I remember we all met in the grandstand at Lidcombe Oval one very cold night, and we were pressured unbelievably by the league, really pressured into signing contracts there and then on the night to stay with the ARL. The initial offer made by the ARL was basically to referee at the same money and same conditions as we were already on, when everybody else in the game, especially on the Super League side and the ARL players, were being offered contract amounts that, we equated to telephone numbers. I think none of us signed on. There might have been one or two signed on that night. I think when most of us didn't sign, relationships really went from bad to worse with the league, and negotiations commenced. It was awful. We attended meeting after meeting. There were warnings if we signed with Super League, we'd never be welcomed back to the establishment. The pressure was full on. Contracts being contracts, anything that was offered to us, we all wanted to have reviewed by solicitors. I don't think the league could quite understand that. And that didn't go over well. Negotiations continued for weeks, and eventually the ARL made quite a substantive offer. I can't remember what it was for everybody, but certainly for first grade touchies, we were being offered a 3-year contract, and I think we received five grand per year for the 3 years just for signing the contract. Our match payments went from something like first grade line went from $150 to $550. And I think the training might have gone from something like $20 to $50. Pretty close to those numbers anyway. I always remember receiving a phone call from Graham Annesley at around 10 o'clock one Sunday night. I was actually in bed. I'd run the 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon game, and I was in bed by 10 o'clock, and Graham rang and got me out of bed. Graham offered me, or asked me, would I sign with Super League? And he was offering something like $6,000 a season and $600 a first grade game. He obviously saw what the ARL had offered and just upped the ante a little. I remember, and I don't think I slept for the rest of that night, and probably not for the next few nights. But I remember all the first grade touchies got together, and I think it was on a Monday afternoon, public holiday. We all got together. As I said, we were all a pretty close-knit group. And we all got together at Dave O'Keefe's house on a Monday afternoon, I think it was, to talk about it and discuss what we were going to do. And in the end, the whole group of touchies, with the exception of Keith Gegg, who I did that President's Cup final with, remained loyal to the ARL. And we all signed contracts with them. Keith was the only one that went to Super League out of that touchies group. I've got to say, my reasoning for staying with the ARL was, I had a couple of reasons. The main one was, whilst I'd established myself in first grade, I was still in my mind, I was still relatively new to that grade. I'd done one state of origin, but I really wanted to do a test match. We hadn't done the test match at that stage, and I really wanted to do a test match. There was no guarantee of Super League competition starting at that time. So that's why I guess I stayed with the ARL. But also, I really wanted to remain loyal to my mates, my fellow touchies, all the New South Wales referees at that time, whether they be, first grade, second grade or third grade referees. I wanted to remain loyal to them. And of course, the association that had done so much for me at that time. That was important to me. And in the end, I suppose it probably really didn't matter which side we signed with. Financially, we were winners. I always remember doing a game in Brisbane at that time with Steve Clark and Cole White. We're flying up to Brisbane, and I remember Cole White saying to me, "Is Clarkie all right? He feels a bit funny or looks a bit funny. He hasn't said much today." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And Clarkie, we went out there, and Clarkie did the game, and I got to say, he didn't have the best game ever. In fact, he had quite a shocker. sometime later, he admitted to Colin I that he'd signed with Super League on that Wednesday before, and obviously had a few things on his mind, and that affected everyone, affected him and the game greatly. And mate, that's how it was at that time. It was a really awful, difficult period to go through.
Now, in 1996, it's another good year for yourself in first grade. You finished the year as standby touch judge for the first grade grand final. We then moved forward to 1997. On a very wet night, you touch judged the city country match at Newcastle. What are your memories of this?
It was a very cold and wet night in Newcastle. Friday night, Channel 9 game again. Charlie Manson was the referee, David Manson. They brought him down from Queensland, which I had no problems running with Charlie, but I just thought it was strange they brought a Queensland referee down to do a New South Wales city country game. But other than that, it was a very cold, very, very wet night. Do you know who the other touchy was? I can't remember.
I think it was a country touch judge.
It might well have been, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, mate. I can't remember who that was, but yeah, it was cold and wet. And look, the city country was again a game I hadn't done before, and a game I always wanted to do. My dad did 2 city country seconds games in his career when they played him at the cricket ground on a Saturday afternoon, and he had done 2 city country games. So I guess it was a game I always wanted to do, again, to emulate the feats that he'd achieved. So it was nice to emulate that achievement. He did one New South Wales Queensland game at the cricket ground, which I happened to be at, and I do remember it. So doing New South Wales Queensland and me doing a couple of State of Origins was great. I emulated his feat with that, but in his days it was New South Wales Queensland. It was before State of Origin, and as I said, I remember it was the cricket ground. And it was actually the game where the then Queensland coach, Barry Muir, nicknamed the Blues the Cockroaches in that year. And that nickname stuck with them from that year onwards.
You highlighted your thirst to continue to get big appointments and representative appointments. In 1997, you're appointed to your second State of Origin. This is the Game 3 at the SFS with referee Eddie Ward and John McCormack as the other touch judge. Firstly, how was it to secure that second game after getting the taste in 1994? And then I'll talk to you a little about, or you can talk to us a little bit about the famous Cattle Dog Blue.
Yeah, mate, it was great to be appointed to a second State of Origin. I think in those days, for the touchies, certainly, they were sort of shared around a little bit between the top group. There was the top group of touchies, and I think the appointments were shared a little bit in those days, which was good. And you were pleased for our fellow mates to get a run and get a State of Origin, but you certainly had to earn your stripes to get up to that, I guess, top group of touchies, if you know where I'm coming from. And everyone, I think, was happy to see others get their game and share it around a little bit. I suppose. And it was nice to run in Sydney, I've got to say. It was nice. I know the family there, Mum was there and my wife was there, and that was great. They say everyone has their 15 seconds of fame, and I guess the Cattle Dog Blue's mine. They seem to roll out that blue every time State of Origin comes around, and of course all my mates, I saw you again, blah, 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 the same old story. But so it's nice to be remembered for something, I guess. But it was a blue. It was a good blue.
Because you had Johns and Goddard, didn't you?
Johns and Goddard, that's right. Goddard, I think they said at the time, was a bit of a boxer actually, so he knew how to fight. But it was interesting because I'd actually, about 10 minutes before that blue started, I had to report Johns and Goddard. I can't remember the exact incident, but Goddard put Johns on his bum. I can't remember whether I come in at a scrum or I come in at a penalty or after a try, but Goddard had put Johns on his bum, and I came in and made the report to Eddie and whatever. And Johns, from that point, had the shits, absolutely had the shits with Goddard. And of course, 10 minutes later, they say that I didn't hear the call, but they say the call went out, cattle dog, and as the story goes, that was the instigation for the blue. Well, the blue started on the far side. I was the near side touchy, so the blue started, and of course, Eddie and Jono and I were madly doing what we do at blues, and we basically had them separated and calmed down. And mate, I was standing between Johns and Goddard, and all Johns wanted to do was get to Goddard. And I'm saying, don't do it, don't even think about it. Don't. And mate, I could have spoken to the brick wall, because he was just determined to get around me and get to Goddard. He wanted to start World War III again. And mate, he ran around me, and as we know, Goddard laid one on him that split him open right down the front of his nose and whatever, and put him on his bum. And it was, something interesting. Well, of course, when we had it all sorted out, I said to Eddie, or Jono, I should say. Jono had the instigators, because it started on the far side. I think Spud Carroll was the instigator, and I said to Eddie, well, I want Johns and Goddard, and I said we had them separated. I said it all stems from the incident before, and mate, we had them calm down, and then Johns wanted to start round 3, and in fact, I think we had to call Johns back onto the field, because he'd gone up the tunnel to get stitched up, and we had to call him back on the field. And then Eddie said, well, you can go and have 10 minutes now to go and get stitched up, and take as long as you like. So it was a great thrill, great night. Yep. And I guess the other part of it is another story. So things seem to happen on State of Origin nights that we all went back to a function at the cricket ground after the game, and Johnny McCormick drove me home, and we left at Someone Got Earthly Hour, and Tommy Pete was the in-goal judge. And as the story goes, mate, whatever time it was, 1 o'clock or whatever in the morning, there was only 2 cars left in Moore Park, the expanse of Moore Park car park. Johnny's car and a car next to him, right next to him. And as we got up to it, the windows were fogged up, the car's bouncing up and down, and who's inside but Tommy Pete? So, mate, you couldn't hide that story anywhere. It was a great story. I don't know what was going on in there, but you couldn't count it. The 2 cars were just parked next to one another at 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and Tommy just happened to be in one of the windows fogged up and whatever.
Now, you're once again appointed to Grand Final Day, this time to the Under-20s Jersey Flegg Grand Final in 1997 between Parramatta and Balmain. The late Paul McBlain was the referee. Do you recall much of this experience?
It was actually one I'd forgotten about. I really enjoyed running with Ralph. Ralph McBlain, Paul. He was a very good referee. He knew how to referee, and he had the respect of the players. Bit of a different character off the field. He had his issues off the field. Again, a great to referee on the day. Unfortunately, poor old Paul, he had a number of health issues, and again, another one to pass away far too young. He was a great character to be around, Ralph. He was a good fella.
Yep. Now, in the twilight of your career, you continue to officiate in the lower grades with some success. In 2000, you judged the Jersey Flegg Grand Final again between Canterbury and Wests at Stadium Australia this time. Kelvin Jeffs was the referee, and Phil Batten was the other touch judge. Despite your first grade career coming to an end, it must have been pleasing to know that you continued to have some success on the field.
Yeah, it was. Probably wasn't where I wanted to be. As I still felt I had a little bit to offer. But that was, Bryan Grant and Peter Louie took over the NRL referees, and a couple of us oldies, I guess, not so oldies at that time, experienced ones that have been around for a while, got dropped, never to return. As I said, disappointing, as probably still had a bit to offer. The game was becoming a different game. They wanted athletes. I think Granty came up with a famous statement at that time, give me an athlete and I'll turn him into a referee. Well, mate, I think as we know, it doesn't quite work out like that. But luckily for me, Dennis Spagarino welcomed me back into the New South Wales squad. where I, hopefully continue to give 100%. When I always thought to myself I could assist the younger referees coming through, pretty much like, had been given to the help that had been given to me, as I said, by the likes of Martin Weeks. It was great to continue on and, as you say, run through the rest of that year. I was running with some terrific guys. It was great. And to run a grand final with Kelvin, who, as I said earlier, was the Jeffsies and the Gilchrists were close family friends, and Batto, Phil Batten, mate, we had some great times. Batto and I laughed and a great guy to be around. We're all good friends, and it was a great thrill to run on grand final day. And it was the year 2000, so to run on the Olympic Stadium just before the Olympics started was made it all the more special.
Now, in 2001, you touch judged the Metro Cup reserve grade grand final between Cabra and Wenty, with Rod Lawrence being the referee, again with Phil Batten. And then in your final year in 2002, you touch judged the Metropolitan first grade grand final between Sydney Bulls and Ryde Eastwood. Again, Rod Lawrence is the referee. Tom Peake was the other touch judge on this occasion. Did you know at the time that this was your last match in grade?
Mate, as I said before, you know when it's time. And I think I knew that it was time for me, and this was pretty much going to be my last game. And it was nice to go out in a grand final. Running with Rocket Lawrence. Rocket was a great referee to run with from Souths. Mate, we had so much fun. He was one of those guys I spent a fair bit of time with in that latter year, running in reserve grade. Mate, he was a referee that had so much, in my mind, had so much natural ability as a referee. He won't be mind saying it because I've said it 1,000 times to him. He was a lazy referee. And if he'd have put it all together, he really could have been one of the best. He did referee first grade, but he could have done a hell of a lot more. He was a very naturally gifted, talented referee. And again, to run with Batto and Tommy Peake was a great thrill. They were just guys that I loved being around and running with. But yes, you do know when it's time, and I knew at that time my time was pretty much up. And I think Dennis rang me during the off season or not long after that grand final. I can't quite remember, and we had a chat we decided to pull the plug. And mate, luckily for me, Dennis asked me to stay on as a match day assessor, which I was very pleased about.
Now we'll start to have a look at some of your achievements off the field and some of the stories there. You're awarded life membership of Cronulla in 1992. The main role you fulfilled away from the field in those days was treasurer from 1986 to 1995. What does this recognition mean for you from your own association?
Yeah, mate, it was a great thrill to receive life membership from Cronulla. I'd been the treasurer for 10 years. I took over that role from one of Cronulla's great members, Noel Duncan. Noel came across from Canterbury, and he was treasurer of Cronulla for the previous 10 years before I took over. Noel went on to serve a further 10 years on the front table as secretary and president, so that he served 20 consecutive years on the front table. Noel, a great achievement. Michael Cassidy actually was a great referee, and Adam's father. Michael took over from me as treasurer, and would you believe Michael held that post as treasurer for the next 21 years? A record that I don't think will ever be beaten. A great Cronulla member. But to receive life membership from my peers was just wonderful. My father always told me that no matter what I achieve, and this was very young when I was young, and he said, no matter what you achieve in your career, you'll always be a Cronulla referee first and foremost. To follow in his footsteps as a life member of and I call it my great Cronulla Association, was just fantastic. I was very lucky. My mum and Alison were there to see me presented with my blazer. Unfortunately, my dad had passed away a couple of years earlier. It was a great thrill.
You've continued to serve at Cronulla. It was only last year that you stepped down from the role of president after being in that role since 2010. What was the catalyst for you taking on the role, and how do you look back on your time in the role?
Yeah, as you said, I've just stood down as president after 10 years, and it was a great honour to be president. I love that. I love that photo you've got. One of our great achievements was to gain Tradies as a sponsor, and Tradies have been fantastic to us. And we presented the chairman of Tradies with that jumper. It was a great achievement. But mate, it was John Belgrave, a former graded referee, that actually got me into that role. John had been the president for the previous 13 years, and he decided to stand down. And he asked me one day, and it was at Sutherland Oval, I still remember, if I'd considered taking on that role when he stood down. And I guess 10 years later, here we are. I was very lucky during my term as president. I had great people around me. In the first year as president, we changed our constitution to a board-style arrangement, pretty similar to what New South Wales had done a couple of years before. I had just the best executive officer, secretary any president could ever ask for. Russell Stevens was fantastic. He's in his 10th year this year, Russell. Russell and I, mate, in my mind, we just made a great team, and we worked really well, really close together. But as I said, we had Michael Cassidy as the finance director, and we had Jared Maxwell as the director of referee development. And as a team, I think we functioned really well at that time. We had some great achievements. We celebrated our 50th anniversary during this period. We developed, as I said, the great sponsorship or partnership with Tradies. We had to deal with some difficult circumstances, extreme lows when we had a junior referee assaulted on the field. That was very tough for everybody. Without doubt, I strongly believe our greatest achievement in that last 10 years was the development of our referees during this period. In the end, we had something like 40 plus junior referees and over 100 active referees on the field. We had a great group come through the junior reps and integrate. As you know, you were part of them, but the Cronulla guys, the Gilchrist, Andrew, Paddy, McRae, Curry, they developed really well. You know, we established the combined training sessions with St George and Canterbury, and they're now undertaken all over Sydney. I strongly believe that having an NRL referee, we had Jared Maxwell being very active within our association, contributed greatly to the development of all our referees, both New South Wales grade and district referees. And I've got to say, I'm very proud of that fact, and I'm still very passionate about my Cronulla association.
Yep. Now, one initiative that you had during your time as president was being one of the first associations to look at the use of GoPro cameras for referee protection and abuse. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, that was introduced to us by Mick Hegarty. Mick's in the photo there. You've got on the left, that's young Portsmouth, Scotty Portsmouth's young fella, who unfortunately was the referee who was assaulted a couple or 12 months later after that photo was taken. But yeah, Mick, the Junior League secretary, we'd had a number of incidents, not extreme incidents, but a lot of incidents where junior referees, were being heckled by crowds and officials and whatever. Nothing to cause a great deal of grief. And I think Mick was in the security industry and came to us and said, look, what if we put GoPros on the referees? Would that help? We could use it for judiciary purposes. You guys could use it for training purposes. And that's how it all came about. And it was all introduced and went through the local leader, the local paper, and our junior referees, or in fact all our referees, started using GoPros. Unfortunately, it wasn't being worn the day that the young bloke was assaulted up at Anzac Oval. I'm not sure why, I can't remember, but unfortunately he wasn't wearing it that day. But not long after that, we had another senior referee was wearing one, and he was pushed and assaulted, and the vision it came up with was just very confronting. So, yeah, so that's how that all came about.
Now, not only have you continued your contribution at district level, but post your retirement from grade, you've contributed as a junior reps coach, touch judging coach, and match day assessor for numerous seasons. How did you find the transition from the active role to coaching, and maybe what are some of the things that you learnt personally from working closely with the younger referees?
Yeah, look, as I said, when I retired, my good mate Dennis Spagarino very kindly asked me to stay involved as a match day assessor. I guess football was part of my fabric, and I couldn't say no. I just wanted to stay involved. Assessing guys that I'd been running with was difficult, but I just adopted the approach of be honest, and that was the simplest way to go, and keep enjoying their company. Um, After a few years, Dennis asked me to be a touch judge coach for the grade squad, which I did with, I think, Bryan Bonney. Bryan and I were the touch judge coaches. I think Kelvin and David J were the referees coaches. We were all under Dennis's control, and that was fun. Really enjoyed that year. It was a fantastic year. We had a great deal of fun. I think the league systems then changed at that point, and Tony Danks came into the role as the New South Wales Rugby League head coach. And I remember, and I went back at that point, I guess, to simply being a match day assessor, which was fine. I had no dramas with that. Peter Filmer was the head coach of the junior reps at that time under Tony, and he was elevated to the grade ranks coaches. And I applied and was accepted as a junior rep coach, where I may remain for the next 3 or 4 years, or 4 years, 4 or 5, 4 years, I think it was, working with you guys. And I worked with 2 of the best coaches and the nicest guys you could ever meet in a million years. Mick Lewis as the head coach, and Steve Clapson was the other coach, and Clappo and I were Mick's assistants. Paul Colina was there for the first year we were involved, but he left and went into clubland and took a couple of roles in with, I think, Balmain and the Parramatta clubs. And Mick Clappo and I then sort of settled into a threesome as the 3 coaches of the junior reps, and as I said, we remained there working together for the next 4 years with a great bunch of junior referees. And Mick and Clappo and I remained very good friends. We were a very close-knit, the 3 of us working together. It was a great working relationships, and we got on so well.
In 1995, you received the George and Amy Hanson Trophy. This was an award that your father also won. This would have been a proud moment for yourself.
Yeah, it was a nice. It was, I got to say, at the time it was most unexpected. It was the last thing I was thinking of. I'm really not sure what I did to deserve that, but it was a great honour. As I say, any honour you receive from your peers is a great honour. It was presented at a ladies' night. I remember at the Concord Function Centre. You got a photo of Danksy, a very young Danksy and I up there at the moment. So it was a great honour. We had a few ladies' nights at the Concord Function Centre, and mate, as you say, it was wonderful to again follow in my father's footsteps.
Now, in 1998, your extensive service to our great association was recognised by being awarded life membership. What are your memories of this occasion and the feelings that followed?
That was beyond my wildest dreams. I remember the annual meeting was at Parramatta on a Sunday morning. I think we'd had a training session. One of those bloody awful runs around Parramatta Park before the annual meeting. I think they brought all the guys down from Queensland and put them in the hotel there at Parramatta on the Saturday night. We had to get up and run around Parramatta Park, and I hated those bloody Parramatta Park. Hated training. Hated those Parramatta Park runs pre-season, and then we followed up with the annual meeting at one of the hotels there in Parramatta. And I guess to my surprise, during the annual meeting, because they keep it quiet who the nominees are at the annual meeting, the sheet came around with Bryan Gilchrist and Max Dunn being nominated for life membership. And mate, I couldn't believe it. And lucky enough, the vote was carried. And I got to say, achieving life membership was just the best feeling, just something that you never ever set out to achieve. And when it happens, it's just the most unbelievable feeling. Again, to be honoured by your peers is just, beyond words. I remember the presentation of our blazers occurred later in the year at a function, the ladies' night function, and it was at the Cockle Bay Wharf in at Darling Harbour. It was a great venue, a wonderful, wonderful venue. I think most of us booked rooms for the night at a hotel in the city, so we didn't have to travel home after the functions. And to stand up and receive my life members blazer with Maxie and Paddy Dunn was just a great feeling. And for Alison and I, it was a very proud moment. My mum was there as well. The interesting part of the night was, when it comes to life membership presentations, when they present something to the wives, a bunch of flowers or a gift as part of the life membership presentations, none of the wives ever make a speech. They might say, "Oh, thank you," and "Thanks to the association," and whatever, and that's about all you ever get out of a wife. No, not my wife. No, not Alison. Mate, she said, "Right, this is my turn," and she made the speech that brought the house down. Having a go at, well, not having, tongue in cheek. It was all a bit of fun, barbecues, having a go at barbecue, training barbecues, interstate trips, end of season dinners, seminars. She brought the house down. And I remember our then chairman's wife, Madeline McCall, and plenty of people there rated it as the best speech ever given by a life member's wife. Mate, we had a great night.
So you served on the board of the association in the role of Director of Affiliate Liaison in 2003 and 2004. What did this role entail at the time, and how did you find working with a great group of gentlemen, including Chairman Tony Danks and the late Les Matthews as Secretary?
Yeah, mate, I had been on the executive committee for a number of years, mainly as the sponsorship committee coordinator. The association then changed their constitution to a board-style arrangement, and I was asked if I would take on the role as the first ever Director Affiliate Liaison. Mate, working with Tony and Les was a great thrill. Les, an icon of the association. What he did for our association, you can't put into words. So working with Tony and Les was just a great thrill. It was felt at that time that the New South Wales Association had distanced itself away from district associations. The Director Affiliate Liaison role was created, I guess, in an attempt to try and close that gap and bring the districts and New South Wales closer together. I can remember in that role attending just about every association's meeting at least once in that year. So it was quite a full-on role, and a lot of travelling around. I remember we created Presidents and Secretaries Nights that later became weekend conferences and eventually just all-day Saturday affairs, and basically began the system. We began the system of administration grants and coaching and development grants that were all distributed to the district associations. So it was a role that we saw as trying to develop and bring closer together the districts and New South Wales that, probably New South Wales had forgotten about there for a period of time, and we needed to get closer together. I held that position for a couple of years and then handed it over to the great Doug Keane, who continued to develop that role even further.
Now, many won't know, but you've officiated quite successfully in wheelchair rugby league. Can you fill us in a bit about some of your achievements in the game and how you got into it?
Yeah, I did that for a couple of years. It all commenced with Clarkey, Steve Clark. I remember putting out an email seeking interested people to assist with wheelchair rugby league. I knew Doug Keane had been involved with it, and I knew they ran their competitions generally in the summer season just up the road here. It's only a matter of a 2-minute walk up the road from my place at the Menai Indoor Sports Centre, which is where the film is there at the moment. So I sort of thought to myself, well, look, the game's been so good to me, I can give something back to the game. And if I'm free on a Sunday afternoon, I can, it's only a 2-minute walk up the road here to the Indoor Sports Centre, and I might be able to give something back and help them out and referee a couple of games. I think that the games they generally ran 2 games each Sunday afternoon. The first game is for anyone to come up and get involved and have a game, and they have their teams, but for the not so skilled people were on the first game, and then the second game of the afternoon that started about 5 o'clock was for the serious fellas. And let me tell you, these guys you've got on here at the moment, they know how to play. The speed that they get up to in their wheelchairs is you've really got to see it to believe it. That guy with the cap on, I've never seen the Canterbury player. I've never seen anyone move so fast in a wheelchair. They really are quite skilled. So, mate, it was just a case of, look, I can walk up the road for 2 minutes and help them out on a Sunday afternoon, and if I'm not doing anything, and that's how it came about. And I think in the end they appointed me to a couple of their grand finals, which was nice, and they appointed me to a couple of their version of State of Origin games, which you've got up on the screen there at the moment. So, so that was nice.
Midway through the 2017 season, your son Andrew was graded to the New South Wales Rugby League Referees Association as member 1000. This was a significant event in the history of the association, and I'm sure a very proud moment for your family. This meant that 3 generations of Gilchrists had attained grade status. Your father Carl, 594, yourself, 748, and Andrew, 1000. Can you describe the emotions around this feat?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I keep saying that. We've had so many good times. God, there's a lovely photo with the Braybrooks and the Gillies. We were all close friends in those days. Mate, it was wonderful. I was very proud to see Andrew graded, and I know his grandfather would have equally been as proud. I'm sure if he was alive today, he would have been at every game that Andrew officiated in. There's no doubt about that. It was a great honour by our association for Andrew to be given the number 1000, and a great honour for our family to be recognised in this manner from the association, and I'm very thankful for the association for that. When Andrew was graded, I was very conscious at the time that I didn't want it to be a family thing, or I didn't want it to be about Bryan or whatever. That was Andrew's day. It was Andrew's day in the sun, and I wanted him to gain all the accolades, along with all the other. I think it was 9 of you guys were graded on this. Was it 9 of you graded on the same night?
Yeah, I think
and I wanted you guys to. Yeah, I wanted you guys to have those accolades. It was not about the Gilchrist. It was about you 9 guys. And the pleasing aspect for me was that I'd spent time with all of you guys, including yourself, in the junior rep squad. That made it all the more special. But for the Gillies, a very special time, and I know his grandmother was just as proud to see a 3rd generation, for her, to see a 3rd generation come through and be graded. Mate, I think she's the one that deserves a medal, having to put up with 3 generations of football husbands, wives, grandsons. Bloody hell, I got no idea how she's done it over all these years. But, mate, it was a very special time, and as I say, great for him, great for the Gillies, and really great for you junior rep guys that came through. It was wonderful to see.
Now, as highlighted, Andrew's quite a successful touch judge in his own right.
Not as good as his father, not as good as his grandfather. Like, he hasn't quite got those skills, but yeah, he's all right.
How did you find the balance of being a father, a coach, and a former touch judge?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Very difficult. I do get very nervous when I watch him. When I watch him referee, and I know my father did with me as well. So it's yeah, it's tough there. As I mentioned, I'm probably tougher on him than I am on anybody else that I watch and assess, just as my father was with me. He'll argue that I'm there to support him. He'll say, no, never, but deep down I am there. I'm very proud of what he's achieved. He's run a number of junior rep final lines. He in his own right has achieved so much. He's been a great contributor to the Cronulla Association. He's won the John Burns Award. He won that a couple of years ago and very deservingly won that award. He's been a delegate from Cronulla. He's been the director member of services for the last number of years, 4 or 5 years, I guess, now. He contributes greatly to Cronulla training with Curry and Paddy. Presentation nights, he contributes greatly to the juniors. He organises all the gear. I guess he's got that giving something back to the game and associations embedded in his DNA. I know he's a well-respected member of the grade squad, and he contributes to the New South Wales referees when needed. I guess the best rap that comes to me, I suppose he receives from others, generally other elderly members, telling me what a great young person he is. Polite, always willing to have a chat. I don't quite see that, but obviously others do. He must have got that from his mother or his grandmother. He's been through a tough time in the last 12 months with heart issues. It's been difficult. I didn't know he had a heart, but anyway, they found one. It just beat at the wrong beat. So he's missed out on all of last season, and now with the coronavirus this year, much of this season. So it's been a bit of a tough time for him. Alice and I actually went down to Thirlmere earlier in the year, pre-COVID. It was a Ron Massey, I'm not sure what they called him, a country game.
Yep.
I think it was, Gilchrist played Thirlmere or something or other, and it was nice to see him back out on the field, albeit very short-lived before COVID came.
Yep. The pinnacle of service recognition in our great association would most certainly be the Eric Cox Medal. Now, you were bestowed this honour at the SCG Life Members function in 2018. What did this mean to you? I know being there on the day, you were very emotional, and it seemed like it was very much a proud moment for yourself.
Oh, mate, it was emotional. And again, most unexpected. It was the last thing I was thinking of. I think the Eric Cox Medal from the association is just a fabulous, fabulous award. And those guys that have won it before me, the Doug Wintons of this world and the Max Dunns and the Kevin Roberts, what an elite group of wonderful, wonderful people. Ian McCall's, Phil Cooley's, mate, I'm sorry, but I'm not in their ballpark. I'm lucky enough to win the award. But those people are just, Peter Filmer, just wonderful, wonderful recipients of the award, and I'm not in their ballpark. But that's in my mind. But mate, winning the Eric Cox Medal in the dining room at the cricket ground in front of all your peers just blew you away. So many great members have won that award. Eric Cox, as I said to you, was a great supporter of me and my father. He graded me and he supported me and put shit on me all throughout my career. The Coxes and the Gilchrists actually go way back to the late 60s when my father first joined the St George Association. Eric was the then secretary of the St George Association. So winning that award in his name was something, extra special. The Coxes and the Gilchrists went way, way back. I thought I'd achieved everything in winning the Amy Hansen Award and receiving life membership. The Eric Cox Medal just topped it all off. It's presented on such a great day. The life members reunion lunch at the cricket ground is just the best day. We have a great day every year. Mate, all the Cronulla guys are there, as you can see. Current and old guys are there to receive that award on such a great day. It's such a very special place that's important to us older referees. Was just fantastic. As I said, receiving in front of all our life members from yesteryear, active referees made that award very, very special. I think, of course, Andrew was there on the day as well, and I think he said a few words from memory. So very nice words. So that was lovely.
I think you're very modest, and you underestimate the impact you've had on many people's careers, mine included. So,
No, mate, I'm not in their ballparks. One of those guys,
congratulations to
I'm
you.
not in their ballparks.
So you're very, very modest. Now, rugby league refereeing has given us all so much. When looking back on your on-field career and the experiences since, what is one of the most important things that you've gained out of rugby league refereeing?
Yeah, mate. Look, that's pretty easy to answer, mate. It's the lifelong friendships and the memories, the fun that we had. Mate, rugby league owes me nothing. It's given me so much. I owe a great deal to rugby league refereeing and the Cronulla and the New South Wales Association. I can never pay back what this game has given me. The wonderful people I've met, the wonderful people I've run with over the years, both at the district level and grade levels, the experiences we've been through, both on and off the field, the fun we've had. As I said, I feel sorry for the guys running around at the moment. I don't think they get the fun out of the game that we had. Social days, nights we've had, as I mentioned, seminars, interstate trips, barbecues, Ryan's end of season trips, bus trips to the Hunter Valleys. Mate, the whole lot is just, it's a ride you wouldn't miss for the world. I've had the best time over my 50 odd years of involvement. My father always told me a very, very long time ago, as a referee, you have your highs and lows in this game, but the highs will outnumber the lows 1,000 to 1. And he was so right. But as I said, it's the wonderful people that I've been a part of, the different characters you meet along the way. I think we could write a book on some of the characters and experiences that we've been through. But, you know, as I say, I wouldn't have missed this journey for the world.
Now, a bit of the lighter side, our fast five to finish off. Barbecue or tomato sauce?
That's easy. Barbecue.
Ford or Holden?
Well, I'm not a car person, but if I had to make a choice, it'd be Holden.
State of Origin or Grand Finals?
I'm greedy. I want both.
You can have both.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I didn't do a first grade grand final. I'd love to do a grand final, but doing State of Origin and Test matches, sorry, yeah, I'm greedy. I want both.
Now, beach or snow?
Certainly beach. I grew up on East Beach at Kiama as a kid. We had an on-site van down there, so I spent a lot of time on the beach. Although I never spent much time at Cronulla beaches as a kid. In the summer, I was always playing cricket, so I never had much time. Never had much time for the snow, as I was too heavily involved in the football season.
And money or free time?
Again, I'm greedy. I want both. As I look ahead to retirement down the track, and at the end of my football career, free time's very important. But a little bit of money to help wouldn't go astray.
Certainly does. Now, before I say goodbye to you, Bryan, this, of course, is our last episode for the series. There are a few thank yous I must make before we go. Firstly, thank you to all the Life members who have been a part of this first series. Each of you have been extremely open and honest whilst sharing your refereeing journeys. There is certainly much to aspire to. Thank you to current Executive Officer Greg McCallum for helping making contact with members and sourcing extra material. Thanks to everyone at home who's been checking out these videos and passing on the positive comments. And finally, I must thank my wife, Imogen, for her understanding and patience in allowing me to explore this interest whilst on-field refereeing commitments have been at a standstill. Thank you for your time today, Bryan. You've contributed so much to the game and refereeing at all levels. You've had a very successful career of your own. Take care, and I look forward to catching up to you soon.
Thanks, Dan. It's been great. And can I just say on behalf of the association, as I look at that photo there of all those that you've interviewed, what a great array of members. But thank you for you and for your services, for what you've been doing. The interviews with all of those guys have been fantastic. Thank you for your time. Thanks to Imogen. And as you say, thank you to the association and the executive, and especially to Greg, as you mentioned. The series has been great, mate. You've done an outstanding job, and you are to be congratulated. Well done. Great effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan. I really appreciate that. As I've said to many, it's a passion of mine, and I think there's so many great stories out there that need to be recognised and preserved as part of our association's history and moving forward. I'll catch up with you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye for
See
now.
you, mate. Bye.